Die, stupid.
Jesus Christ! He's so high he's walking through people!
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Rick and Morty Season 9, Episode 9 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs, WTF moments, and references, so we'll break it all down. Everybody praying for Fart Baby that it's okay, maybe also call child services too. The episode is titled Salute Your Morts, a reference to the classic 90s Nickelodeon show Salute Your Shorts. The series focused around the life of young campers at a fictional Camp Anawana. So this was basically like the summer camp episode. You could also think of it as the Wet Hot American Summer episode because a lot of the guest stars were from Wet Hot American Summer. There were even some deep cuts to the very first live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. During the episode, Rick drops Morty and Summer off at Camp Sugargale, where they're allowed to do whatever they want, and the reality being the campers turn crazy, like it devolves into absolute chaos, almost a Lord of the Flies situation, war breaking out between them and the townspeople, because it turns out leaving kids unsupervised and a bunch of spoiled rich kid brats turns out to be a disaster. The cold open this week is Beth and Jerry being called in for a meeting with the principal because Morty and Summer have gotten way too out of control at school too many times recently and passed around some organic matter in this recent attempt, giving people perfect memories, which feels kind of like a super Ritalin on the surface, but the way they use it in the episode, the performance-enhancing aspect of it, just causes them to constantly relive their orgasms, making that nothing gets done in absolute chaos at the school. Morty and Summer proceed to be as rebellious as possible using a number of Rick's different devices to their advantage, Morty replacing himself with ninja clones, which is actually a pretty cool trick, but obviously it's based on Rick's technology. This is all based on Rick's technology. Summer made the school toilets harass the girls about their weight when they sat down on them, and then the principal calls this their third sci-fi strike just this semester, meaning a strike against their disciplinary record. They've done big things like this multiple times this semester, and probably previous semesters too, and typically in baseball rules, third strike and you're out, so he expels them, or tries to expel them. Next new piece of Rick's technology allows them to mute boomer frequencies, basically older people's speech. She texts Rick, who portals in like a genie. They make a bunch of jokes about him turning into a genie, not wanting to be called one, when he then turns the principal into a giant carrot with his spade tool that he also uses later in the episode too, turning other people into giant carrots that he tries to sell. Apparently Rick has a side business as a farmer. He also had farming books on his desk in last week's episode to learn how to make that better version of vodka, so it seemed like that was what all his farming pursuits were for, but this carrot thing seems like a completely new side project. The principal takes back his expulsion because he's so afraid of them, so that sort of resets them for next week. They're not going to be expelled when next week picks up. Morty then ninja logs Rick, which is more of his technology. It's a thing. Summer's impressed, which is pretty rare that she's impressed with something that Morty does, and they call Rick out for being lazy like hypocrites because they themselves are also being very lazy and very rebellious. Rick then having the idea to give them some tough love by shipping them to a sleepaway camp for spoiled rich kids off-world at Camp Sugargale, which sounds like a lot of rich parents around the multiverse have done, because we see a lot of kids from characters around the multiverse in previous episodes. They then have a bit where they argue the morality of shipping the kids away rather than dealing with the underlying psychological problems that are causing them to act out and rebel, while Rick calls Morty to his hand like Thor calling his hammer, which is pretty funny. Like, he just has that ability now to call Morty to his hand. Whosoever holds this Morty, if they be worthy. I literally just did a video about Steve Rogers in the Avengers Doomsday trailer doing this thing, calling Thor's hammer to his hand. There are no new scenes from the new version of the intro in this week's episode. We only have one episode left this season, so maybe there'll be one more intro in next week's episode. But it's actually a pretty normal thing that not all the new intro scenes wind up in episodes each season. On the way to camp, Morty kicks the back of Rick's seat, foreshadowing Beth doing it when she's in her constant high state, just proving that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, like mother, like son. Rick calls them remora fish who leech off of larger sharks to survive, likening them to parasites who don't know that they're parasites, and he's a smart and powerful one in the family, which is correct, like he's got him there. When Morty says they arced onto the same page, he and Summer, that's a writer's term, a very writerly thing to say. Maybe this is Dan Harmon and the other show writers just making fun of themselves, but it means their character arcs bring them to the same place, usually in an emotional way. They're using it in this context, but sometimes in a physical way too. But I think also it's calling Morty out for being pretentious and thinking he's smart when he's not really that smart. Rick reminds us that he has a partition separating the back seat in the ship. I can't remember the last time we saw him use a partition like this, but it's also a reference to old family-sized cars like station wagons or limousines that do have those glass partitions that allow you to separate the driver's cabin from the passengers when the parents don't want to listen to the unruly kids in the back seat. Summer makes a Beyoncé reference using her Partition song, and then Morty prank calls Rick in the front seat, making him think that he made the cover of Lab Coat magazine, which is apparently something that Rick really covets, like he's really excited to think that he's on the cover of that magazine. He forcibly extracts all the implants from their bodies. It looks super painful, and it's a good way to remind you that most of their bodies have been replaced many times over at this point, and just repairs them with fully organic, normal human body parts. So that carries forward into next week's episode too. When he puts him in the pod and shoots him out of the ship, that feels like a Jetsons joke. They then arrive at Camp Shergill and learn that the kids have taken over the camp and they're allowed to do whatever they want. So this whole spread with all the kids doing crazy things also feels like a reference to the movie called Camp Nowhere, where a bunch of kids create their own fake camp so they can do anything that they want. There are a number of camp-based movies, camp-based TV shows that you could draw references to in this episode. You probably recognize the voices of these two aliens who introduced them to Camp 2. They're played by Joe Latruglio and Ken Marino, who were also part of Wet Hot American Summer, along with Janine Garofalo, who plays a completely different character from the town later. So a lot of Wet Hot American Summer energy in this episode too. Looking around the camp in the episode, all the younger kids that you see are pretty much versions of aliens and other creatures that you've seen across every single episode of Rick and Morty, like all the big characters. There's a poopy butthole girl with a mohawk. The lawn chair with balloons feels like a reference to Lawn Chair Larry, who actually did that in real life, but that's Timmy from their high school. So that's another kid from their high school at this camp, whose father is Bill Pullman at the end of the episode. Beth even freaks out when she sees him, like, is that Bill Pullman? Bill Pullman in real life also does have a real-life son called Lewis Pullman, who plays Sentry in Bob in the Thunderbolts movie, and now in Avengers Doomsday, like we were just seeing the Avengers Doomsday trailer. There's a corn detective girl, there's a Gromflemite boy, there's a squanchy kid, there's a goth bird person creature, there's a chud person kid riding a skateboard. There even seem like there's some characters based on Metalocalypse too, which is another Adult Swim deep cut. I think there's some other characters here too from other Adult Swim shows in the background. Basically kid versions of all the big characters on the show, like I said, for the most part. Beth and Jerry do drugs together to celebrate because it's the first time that they've had peace and quiet at the house in a long time, and they want to let loose and be kids themselves again. That's kind of the idea here, the whole metaphor, is them trying to unwind and just be kids again. And wind up stealing some super drugs from Summer that she got from, we later find, Space Beth, that was basically used in case of emergencies, like a measure of last resort kind of thing to do. We see that Summer has her own secret compartment. This is only the first one that we found. I wouldn't be surprised if she has more of them hidden around her room, which feels like something she learned from Rick. Like, this is all Rick's technology when you think about it. Her little cubby is full of all kinds of paraphernalia, everything you could possibly imagine, but she picks up the one inadvertently that belonged to Space Beth that she gave her.
Summer, did they take that stuff I gave you for a rainy day?
When they start smoking, she knows that they used to do this when they were younger. There are a lot of references to things they did when they were younger, like them going to prom and things like that. Basically them being kids again, remembering what it was like to be kids. And it winds up being some super cosmic, ultra powerful crap because it causes them to get high forever with no calm down, like it's not supposed to wear off, apparently according to the label. So they basically start acting like Rick and Morty were acting for pretty much the rest of the episode. There are a bunch more Easter eggs back at summer camp. There's an arcade machine called Mortal Mudbutt, which is obviously Mortal Kombat reference, probably changed for copyright reasons, like please don't sue us. There's a Mr. Stabby kid with knives for arms and feet. The fart graffiti feels like foreshadowing for the fart baby. Like there's a lot of fart graffiti. There's a box of fart things, which is basically all the graffiti paint, which just feels like them foreshadowing the fart baby. There's another Numbericon kid. There's a couple at the camp. When the kids tell him, anything you want to do, you do. That's a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was a line spoken by Sam Rockwell himself in one of the first movies that he was ever in. Big deep cut. Went on to do a whole bunch of other movies and be a big part of the Marvel Universe too. Also, the giant skate ramp feels like another reference to that movie too. In the movie, in the Foot Clan, where they go to party with all the other kids, there's a giant skate ramp through all that level of the Foot Clan's base. There's another arcade called Frog Her, which is a reference to Frogger, also probably for copyright reasons. They reveal they murdered the original adult counselors, the Gromflemite kid then making out with the gear person. We get another Herald alien kid. They show up all the time each season in the background. And one of the behind-the-scenes jokes is that the animators just reuse the same model from the same character and just call it a different person each time. So when you see them show up, they're basically just copying and pasting the character into the background and just zooming and enhancing on the size sometimes. There are a couple of funny moments where you see a bunch of the kids getting shot up at the archery range, like it starts devolving into absolute chaos with kids getting hurt left and right. They then revealed the secret of the camp is that many of the kids are just so rich with trust funds that they just DoorDash any supplies that they need regularly, which is why they haven't all died before this. The Edward Merlot hands is a super deep cut reference to Edward Scissorhands. We actually played that game in college. You can raise your hand if you played a version of that game too, but we did it as Edward 40 hands, and you basically duct tape two 40s to both your hands, and you have to drink them before you could remove them from your hands and use them again. But I wouldn't recommend doing it. Like, do not go out and try that. Usually it did not end well for anybody. Usually you can't do anything after you finish them. There are a number of different scenes in a montage with the raves that they all go to each night. The helmeted DJ feels like a Daft Punk reference. Beth and Jerry descend further into their high and come to the realization that Jackson Pollock paintings are different visualizations of suicide, and then see that Summer has a special crystal on her laptop that allows her to access the intergalactic or possible multiverse internet, which they call Google, but on screen it's spelled Schmoogle, probably also for legal reasons like Google, please don't sue us. Learning about a special substance called Darkan at a planet Mart that allows them to come back down to reality, and they hail a space Uber, doing things behind Rick's back and just acting like kids, like Morty and Summer. They basically turn into another version of Morty and Summer. This also feels like one of the apocryphal jokes that kids always told each other about their parents. Like, when you go to camp, everybody always thought that their parents were partying it up without them, and that's what you told other kids, like, oh, my parents are back having fun without me. And a lot of times, they probably were. Rick then reveals that he's turned a couple of other people, we don't know who they are, into carrots that he's trying to sell. You can let me know who you think these people were, because they all look like they have faces on them, just like Principal Vagina did. When Beth says to make irregular rhythms to avoid detection, it's a Dune reference, try not to alert sandworms when you walk through the desert. Jerry references Shai Hulud, the great worm of Arrakis. You could also think of it as a reference to Leto Atreides, too, God Emperor of Dune universe, who was also part sandworm. We are also going to see a young Leto II during Dune Part 3 later this year, but he's a long way off from turning into part sandworm.
Because it's meant to destroy you.
Maybe if they continue with a line of new Dune movies and actually do a God Emperor of Dune movie, that would actually be pretty cool, or even do it as a TV series. When they get into their living space Uber, it's basically a creature that just forms its insides into whatever its inhabitants desire, and for them it's the interior of the limo that they took to prom when they were kids before Summer was born. And they make a joke about getting it on for the first time and Jerry not knowing what to do because they were kids, and it's also basically how Summer was conceived. Took Jerry a little while to find the right hole so that they could actually conceive Summer. Then, because they're still so high, they rip their way out of the alien creature's body, still in the vacuum of space, harming it and causing it to crash on the planet and almost die. But it's not dead. It just says that it's making a lot of runs to the airport recently, which is just another joke about Uber drivers. You also notice the place where they crash, right behind them, there's another Gromphlamite. There's just a bunch of different aliens that you see across the show, all peppered around the background. Anytime they need a big wide shot on an alien planet with a bunch of different aliens, you see a lot of familiar faces, just them reusing character models from previous aliens in the series. Morty and Summer's montage of partying every night gets worse and worse and worse, more chaotic. It devolves into violence, and eventually Margot has the fart baby. She even says it's not the first one that she's had here at camp, and they try to give it a beer, like it really goes over the top. Morty points out the contradictions of their rules, too. Like, they're not supposed to be any rules, then there's one rule, then there's two rules all of a sudden, so it doesn't make any sense. If you haven't watched Wet Hot American Summer, there's also a lot of contradictions in the things that the camp counselors tell the kids, like, just do what I say, and they'll just make up rules on the fly. Probably the most WTF moment of the episode is that as they're running away, Morty and Summer reveal they did actually make the baby do the beer bong, even though they regret it, so you do feel kind of bad for that baby, but it's still alive at the end of the episode. Beth and Jerry then, still high, fall asleep at the space version of IKEA because, like, the whole planet is basically a giant shopping mart. Jerry craps in one of the toilets that are for sale. They then have a longer bit about pharmacies that require you to get help from employees by using those type of alert buttons when things are locked behind cages and it's just taking forever. But because we're talking about Rick and Morty, they dial it up to like 1,000 and the person has to fly from the other side of the planet to actually help them out. They then steal the medicine and have an escape montage to what seems like a giant Walmart or Target or mechanized Amazon warehouse run by robots, which is an actual thing. Sometimes you'll see pictures of the interiors of Amazon warehouses, and they're actually automated with giant robots running a lot of the operations. Only to find then that the medicine only works on dual heart life forms, so it doesn't work on them, forcing them to call Rick for help, which Beth didn't want to do. The metaphor being that sometimes it is okay to ask for help when you need it, and to admit that you can't do everything for yourself, even if she wants to feel like an adult. Really big coincidence, too, is that Tom Holland said that Spider-Man Brand New Day, like big MCU movie that we're about to see in a couple weeks, is basically about this concept, learning to ask for help when you need it. Rick then portals in, also on the Always High compound that they just took, so he's absolutely no help to anyone either. Morty and Summer arrive at the town during the A storyline, and all the locals hate the kids, want them dead because the kids are all dirtbags. They then meet Janine Garofalo's character playing the bartender who yells at them. Like I said, she was also part of Wet Hot American Summer as a sort of like stern camp counselor leading the group. She hands them the huge 80s cordless phone, which is a giant deep cut. Raise your hands if your parents ever had one of these. Morty then reveals Rick's phone number is 12, which feels like a big lore dump. I don't think they've ever actually revealed his real phone number before, and earlier this season, he made a really big deal about other people not getting that phone number. They then reveal their plan to capture all the campers and extort money out of their rich parents. Morty then cries about never getting help just as Rick and the parents portal in while still messed up, and Rick leaves his portal gun behind again. He's done this a couple times this season so that he can't use it to escape easily. Morty and Summer also wind up being the disciplinary responsible people, with the parents all being the messed up ones, so the shoe winds up being on the other foot, which has happened a couple times this season before where they'll switch roles in the episode. For a very brief moment, the rich kids also follow their example, proving that they can be responsible too, but only for a second. The townspeople also have a joke about using bidets instead of regular outhouse toilets, which actually feels like a bit that Ken Marino did in real life on a podcast that I heard. I can't remember where the podcast was from, but he was going on and on about how huge a fan he was of bidets and trying to explain to other celebrities on the podcast why they should use bidets instead of regular toilets.
Can't believe these kids had access to bidets and didn't think to use it.
I really hate standing guard.
Rick winds up taking out a bunch of them while super messed up without really doing anything because his body is full of weaponry and automatic defenses, and he himself is so intelligent that he knows that stuff like this happens on a regular basis, so he's actually prepared for stuff like this. But I think the actual comp is the way they did the action scene is they're going for Jackie Chan drunken master types of references. Rick has also mentioned his abilities like this in the past, like please don't touch me because if you do, you'll die instantly, and he just has those defenses that he can use, and they just whip them out based on whatever comedic bit they want to use them for in the episode. He is almost literally Inspector Gadget, like his body can produce anything that the episode might need. You can all let me know in the comments which of his weapons are your favorite, like which takedown is your favorite. During their big final fight against the townspeople, they play REM, End of the World, and they reveal Morty was right on the money when he said that the parents of all the rich kids might not care about them enough to actually be blackmailed when the barkeep isn't able to successfully get any money out of them. Like, shouldn't you care about your kids even more? Rick then sobers up by just walking straight into the lake, which is kind of funny, and we find out who the father of the fart baby is. They have this kind of happy ending for it too, like, I want you to meet Fart Baby. Space Beth then shows up in Rick's ship, not hers for some reason, and pick them all up because she's the only one that's sober right now. As far as we know, she's probably still using more of those worms that just eat all your worries and your fears while she's so chill about all this. Now anytime she shows up and she's got that same look on her face, you just imagine that she's on those worms again. All the other campers' parents show up, and on the ride home, Beth starts kicking the back of Space Beth's chair just like Morty did earlier in the episode because, like I said, they've devolved into kids and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Rick, still messed up, wants to go to Del Taco for food, who really likes someone who works there named Dawn, and Beth and Jerry complain to Space Beth that she won't have sex with them anymore, and it sounds like it's been a little while, so giving you an idea of the timeline, like Space Beth feels like they're too toxic, and she just doesn't want to deal with all that drama. The episode winds up being so traumatic for Morty and Summer that they're scared sober and straight and promise to behave from now on, but we'll see how long that lasts, probably for like 1 week until next week's episode. That's usually how these things wind up going. Then during the post-credits scene this episode, Jerry, after he's come back down, gives a presentation at his new marketing job that he just got this season and comes up with a new mascot called Cool Horse, a smoking horse, which is a reference to Joe Camel in real life, which was used by R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company to make cigarettes seem cooler to younger people who would buy them more. And you can let me know in the comments if you think he was just hallucinating Rick showing up in his farmer outfit like he was going to turn Jerry into another carrot then disappear, or if Rick was actually there. He then freaks out, but the boardroom actually gets more into his idea when he yells, not realizing that it was Rick that he was yelling at, just making them all seem like idiots, because R.J. Reynolds got sued almost into oblivion for Joe Camel and basically giving cancer to a ton of people. Like, there were so many reasons why they got sued. Cancer was just part of it, but the tobacco industry has been paying out billions and billions as part of the giant settlement that they had to make a number of years ago. So whoever their client is that Jerry's creating this mascot for is probably going to get sued out of oblivion too. You also notice in the room there's a Hungry for Apples poster on the wall, which was a pitch to his old company back in the early seasons. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below and let me know if you spotted any Easter eggs or references in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video. My full episode 10 finale video will post next week after they release it, and the really big reminder is it is the final episode. We'll probably get a preview of that at Comic-Con this weekend, and maybe they'll talk a little bit more about the Rick and Morty movie that Dan Harmon recently confirmed. So whatever they wind up doing, I'll include that in my finale video next week. Everybody click here for that episode. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my other Rick and Morty episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.